April 30, 1945. 3:47 a.m. 16 meters beneath the Reichskanzlei garden, Berlin. ***. The walls are weeping. Not metaphorically, actual condensation streams down the concrete, pooling in the corners where the bunker's ventilation system wheezes like a dying man's last breaths. The air tastes of mildew, unwashed bodies and something else. The acrid bite of fear that no amount of disinfectant can mask. SS Brigadeführer Wilhelm Mohnke stands at attention outside the conference room, his uniform immaculate despite everything, though his eyes betray the truth. He hasn't slept in 43 hours. Above ground, the city is being systematically erased. Every 8 seconds, a Soviet shell crashes into Berlin's skeletal remains. The bunker shudders with each impact, not violent shakes, but subtle tremors that rattle the iron crosses on the walls and send ripples across the cold coffee in abandoned cups. Somewhere in the upper levels, a woman is crying. No one goes to comfort her. There's no comfort left to give. Hitler emerges from his private quarters at 4:12 a.m., and the handful of officers still present snap to attention with varying degrees of conviction. He looks like something exhumed, 70 pounds lighter than his propaganda photos, his left hand trembling uncontrollably, a palsy he can no longer hide. His eyes, once capable of holding a crowd of thousands in rapture, now dart around the map room like a cornered animal seeking an exit that doesn't exist. Where is Steiner? His voice cracks on the question. Where is Steiner's counterattack? General Hans Krebs, chief of the General Staff, exchanges a glance with General Oberst Wilhelm Burgdorf. Neither wants to be the one to answer. The bunker's only functioning telephone rings, a jarring sound that makes everyone flinch. SS Sturmbannführer Otto Gunsch picks it up, listens, and his face drains of color. Mein Führer, Gunsch begins, then stops. Starts again. The Reichstag has fallen. The words land like a grenade in the confined space. For a moment, the only sound is the distant thud of artillery and the mechanical wheeze of the ventilation system. The Reichstag, that neoclassical monument where Hitler had seized absolute power 12 years ago, where torchlight parades had celebrated the birth of the thousand-year Reich, is now flying the red hammer and sickle. Hitler's hand stops trembling. It simply freezes, half-raised, as if his body has forgotten what it was supposed to do next. His mouth opens, closes, opens again. No sound emerges. Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas von Below, his Luftwaffe adjutant, watches the Führer's face undergo a transformation he'll describe in his memoirs as the precise moment a man watches his god die. Impossible. The word comes out as barely a whisper. The Leibstandard, the Nordland Division, they're defending the Reichstag. They would never. They fought to the last man. Mein Führer, Krebs interrupts, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he's saying. Soviet infantry reached the roof at 3 a.m. They've raised their flag. The map table between them is a fiction. Red arrows representing Soviet armies converge on Berlin from every direction. Zhukov from the east, Konya from the south. The city is a shrinking circle of blue, representing German forces that exist more on paper than in reality. Someone, probably Krebs, has been updating the map with brutal honesty. The Ninth Army, which Hitler had counted on to relieve Berlin, is marked with a single notation, vernichtet. Annihilated. Hitler reaches for the edge of the table, his fingers leaving damp prints on the acetate overlay. The Ninth Army will break through. Wenck will arrive from the west. The Americans will see reason and join us against the Bolsheviks. Each sentence is a brick in a wall he's constructing against reality, but the wall is transparent and everyone in the room can see through it. Burgdorf clears his throat. Mein Führer General Wenck's 12th Army is engaged with American forces near the Elbe. They cannot. Hitler's head snaps up. There is no cannot in the German vocabulary. I gave an order. Steiner will attack. The Ninth Army will break through. The Luftwaffe will. He stops. Even he cannot finish that sentence. The Luftwaffe is 500 aircraft scattered across fields without fuel, flown by boys who learned to fly 3 weeks ago and died 3 days later. Göring is in Bavaria, negotiating surrender terms with the Americans. The revelation came yesterday, and Hitler had raged for 2 hours before collapsing in his chair, spent. Magda Goebbels appears at the entrance to the corridor, her 6 children asleep in the room behind her. She's dressed as if for a state dinner, elegant, composed, her hair perfectly arranged. She doesn't speak, just stands there, a ghost at the feast, waiting. She knows. They all know. The next shell hits closer than the others. The bunker's lights flicker, die, then surge back with a hum that sounds almost accusatory. In that moment of darkness, you can hear Hitler's breathing, rapid, shallow, the respiration of a man drowning on dry land. When the lights return, he's staring at the map again, but his eyes aren't focused on the symbols and arrows. They're looking through them into something only he can see, the smoking ruins of his dreams, the corpses of his ambitions, the final bill for 12 years of madness coming due all at once. Krebs spreads a new dispatch across the map table, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. It's a teletype from SS Obergruppenführer Felix Steiner, and the paper trembles slightly in his hands, not from fear but from exhaustion. The message is brief, brutally so: attack impossible. Divisions exist in name only. No ammunition. No fuel. No reinforcements. Request permission to withdraw remaining elements. Hitler reads it 3 times. His lips move silently, forming the words as if speaking them aloud might change their meaning. When he finally looks up, something fundamental has shifted in his expression. The rage that has sustained him for weeks, the volcanic fury that erupted whenever anyone mentioned retreat or surrender, has evaporated, leaving behind something far more disturbing: a terrible, hollow clarity. Steiner, he says, and the name hangs in the stale air like an epitaph. Steiner was to attack with the 3rd SS Panzer Corps. Where is the 3rd SS Panzer Corps? No one answers immediately. They've had this conversation before in various forms across various maps. But this time feels different. This time, Hitler isn't asking because he expects a solution. He's asking because he already knows the answer, and he needs someone else to confirm what he can no longer deny. Von Below takes a breath. Mein Führer, the 3rd SS Panzer Corps, it was destroyed 3 weeks ago at Silo Heights. What remains has been absorbed into. Yes. The word cuts through the explanation like a scalpel. Yes, of course. Hitler's right hand reaches up to massage his left shoulder, a gesture his doctors have seen increasingly in recent months, a phantom pain from the 1944 bomb blast that nearly killed him. And the Ninth Army? What remains of Bussy's forces? Bergdorf unfolds a field report, but Hitler waves it away before he can read. Encircled, the Führer continues, answering his own question. Trapped in the Halby pocket. 50,000 men trying to break west through Soviet lines. Most will die. The rest will surrender. He speaks these words without emotion, reciting facts from a history that's already been written. The 12th Army, Wenck's forces, they're fighting Americans not coming here. The garrison at Potsdam surrendered yesterday. The garrison at Spandau will surrender today or tomorrow. Each statement lands with the weight of a coffin lid being nailed shut. The officers exchange glances, uncertain whether this sudden rationality is more alarming than the denial that preceded it. Gunch enters again, salutes. Mein Führer, another message from the Chancellery defenses. Soviet infantry have reached Wilhelmstrasse. They're 200 meters from the garden entrance. 200 meters. Roughly 2 city blocks. The entire Reich, the empire that was supposed to last 1,000 years, now measures its territory in meters. You could walk the entire length of Hitler's domain in 3 minutes. Martin Bormann pushes through the doorway, his bulldog face flushed, carrying a leather briefcase stuffed with papers. Mein Führer, I have the evacuation plans. We can move you to Berchtesgaden within the hour. The roads south are still. No. Hitler doesn't shout it. He barely speaks above a whisper, but the word carries absolute finality. No more retreating. No more tactical withdrawals. No more temporary setbacks. He turns to face Bormann fully, and his adjutants will later describe the look on his face as that of a man who has just stepped off a cliff and is experiencing the strange peace that comes before impact. Do you know what the German people will say about me, Bormann? What history will record? Bormann opens his mouth to respond with some platitude about legacy and the judgment of history, but Hitler continues. They will say I was a madman who destroyed Germany. They will say I led them to ruin. And they will be right. The confession stuns everyone into silence. This is not the Hitler of the Nuremberg rallies, the hypnotic orator who convinced millions to follow him into the abyss. This is something else entirely, a man watching his own mythology collapse in real time, unable to look away from the wreckage. Krebs attempts to salvage the moment. Mein Führer, the people fought bravely. No one can question the sacrifice. The people? Hitler's laugh is sharp, bitter. The people stopped following me weeks ago. They follow whoever has bread. Whoever can promise them their children won't be raped by Russian soldiers. He gestures at the map with a sweep of his trembling hand. This fantasy we've been maintaining down here? Soviet armies 10 divisions strong that are actually 10 men with 1 rifle? Counterattacks by ghost divisions? Air support from aircraft that exist only on paper? He picks up a red marker, the kind used to denote enemy positions, and begins drawing. Not tactics or strategy but simple, crude circles around Berlin, each one tighter than the last, a spiral closing in on itself. This is reality. This has been reality since January, since the Vistula offensive. Since Bagration. Since Stalingrad, if we're being honest. The marker squeaks against the acetate. Circle after circle after circle. The Reichstag has fallen, he continues, his voice taking on a strange, detached quality, as if he's narrating someone else's defeat. The building where I gave my first speech as Chancellor. Where we celebrated the enabling act. Where the 1,000-year Reich was born. Another circle. Now it has a Soviet flag on the roof. How long did it take them? Hours? Minutes? They fought for 3 days, mein Führer, Monk says quietly. The defenders. 3 days. Hitler nods slowly. 3 days for the symbol of German power to fall. Rome burned for 6. He sets down the marker. His hand is shaking again, worse than before. When did it happen, Krebs? When did we actually lose this war? Not when did I realize it, when did it actually end? Krebs considers the question seriously, understanding that Hitler is asking something genuine. Kursk, perhaps. July 1943. After that, we never regained the initiative in the east. Earlier, von Below says softly. December 1941. Moscow. When the first Siberian divisions arrived and we couldn't take the city. Pearl Harbor, Bergdorf suggests. The moment America entered the war, the mathematics became impossible. Hitler listens to each assessment, nodding slightly as if taking notes for a history he'll never write. All good answers. All correct in their way. He walks, shuffles really, to the corner where a small portrait of Frederick the Great hangs, slightly askew from the latest artillery barrage. But I think it was earlier still. I think we lost the moment we began. The moment I convinced myself that will could overcome mathematics. That faith could defeat factories. That destiny was more powerful than logistics. He reaches up to straighten the portrait, and his hand freezes there, touching the frame. Frederick was saved by a miracle. His enemies collapsed from internal conflict. He called it the miracle of the House of Brandenburg. Hitler's voice drops to barely a whisper. I kept waiting for my miracle. Even yesterday I thought perhaps Roosevelt's death would be it. Perhaps the alliance would fracture. Perhaps. He stops. Doesn't finish the thought. Because there is no perhaps anymore. There's only the Red Army 200 meters away and closing. Krebs attempts to salvage the moment. Mein Führer, the people fought bravely. No one can question the sacrifice. The people? Hitler's laugh is sharp, bitter. The people stopped following me weeks ago. They follow whoever has bread. Whoever can promise them their children won't be raped by Russian soldiers. He gestures at the map with a sweep of his trembling hand. This fantasy we've been maintaining down here? Soviet armies 10 divisions strong that are actually 10 men with 1 rifle? Counterattacks by ghost divisions? Air support from aircraft that exist only on paper? He picks up a red marker, the kind used to denote enemy positions, and begins drawing. Not tactics or strategy but simple, crude circles around Berlin, each one tighter than the last, a spiral closing in on itself. This is reality. This has been reality since January, since the Vistula offensive. Since Bagration. Since Stalingrad, if we're being honest. The marker squeaks against the acetate. Circle after circle after circle. The Reichstag has fallen, he continues, his voice taking on a strange, detached quality, as if he's narrating someone else's defeat. The building where I gave my first speech as Chancellor. Where we celebrated the enabling act. Where the 1,000-year Reich was born. Another circle. Now it has a Soviet flag on the roof. How long did it take them? Hours? Minutes? They fought for 3 days, mein Führer, Monk says quietly. The defenders. 3 days. Hitler nods slowly. 3 days for the symbol of German power to fall. Rome burned for 6. He sets down the marker. His hand is shaking again, worse than before. When did it happen, Krebs? When did we actually lose this war? Not when did I realize it, when did it actually end? Krebs considers the question seriously, understanding that Hitler is asking something genuine. Kursk, perhaps. July 1943. After that, we never regained the initiative in the east. Earlier, von Below says softly. December 1941. Moscow. When the first Siberian divisions arrived and we couldn't take the city. Pearl Harbor, Bergdorf suggests. The moment America entered the war, the mathematics became impossible. Hitler listens to each assessment, nodding slightly as if taking notes for a history he'll never write. All good answers. All correct in their way. He walks, shuffles really, to the corner where a small portrait of Frederick the Great hangs, slightly askew from the latest artillery barrage. But I think it was earlier still. I think we lost the moment we began. The moment I convinced myself that will could overcome mathematics. That faith could defeat factories. That destiny was more powerful than logistics. He reaches up to straighten the portrait, and his hand freezes there, touching the frame. Frederick was saved by a miracle. His enemies collapsed from internal conflict. He called it the miracle of the House of Brandenburg. Hitler's voice drops to barely a whisper. I kept waiting for my miracle. Even yesterday I thought perhaps Roosevelt's death would be it. Perhaps the alliance would fracture. Perhaps. He stops. Doesn't finish the thought. Because there is no perhaps anymore. There's only the Red Army 200 meters away and closing. A new sound penetrates the bunker, not artillery this time but small arms fire. The distinctive crack of Karabiner 98K rifles mixing with the deeper chatter of Soviet PPSH submachine guns. Close. Very close. Perhaps in the Chancellery Garden itself, perhaps in the upper bunker levels where the servants and administrative staff huddle in darkness. Monk excuses himself and moves toward the stairwell, hand on his sidearm. The combat is literally overhead now, seeping down through 16 meters of concrete and earth like water finding cracks in a dam. When he returns 5 minutes later, his face tells the story before his words do. Soviet reconnaissance teams have penetrated the garden perimeter. The SS guards are holding them at the emergency exit, but, he pauses, choosing his words carefully. Casualties are heavy. Some of the younger men are asking permission to surrender. Hitler doesn't react to this with the fury they expect. Instead, he asks a simple question. How old? Mein Führer. The young men who want to surrender. How old are they? Monk thinks. 16. 17. One claims to be 18, but I have my doubts. Children. Hitler says the word as if tasting it, finding it bitter. We're asking children to die for a government that will cease to exist before sunset. He turns to Krebs. What happened to the Leibstandard? The actual units, not the boys we gave their uniforms to. Krebs consults his notes, though he doesn't need to. Every senior officer in this bunker has these figures memorized, burned into their consciousness like a brand. The 1st SS Panzer Division was virtually destroyed in Hungary in March. Survivors were reassigned to defend Vienna, then fell back too. They retreated without orders. Hitler interrupts, but there's no anger in the statement. Sepp Dietrich. My oldest comrade. The man who commanded my personal bodyguard since 1928. He retreated without orders and I stripped them of their cuff bands. Do you remember that, Gunch? Gunch nods stiffly. Yes, Mein Führer. March 27th. You ordered their unit insignia removed for cowardice. Cowardice. Hitler tests the word. I called it cowardice when they chose to save their men instead of dying for a lost position. What would you call what I'm doing now? What word describes a leader who orders boys to die while he hides underground? The question hangs unanswered because there is no safe answer. The bunker's ventilation system chooses this moment to emit a grinding shriek, metal on metal, before settling back into its labored wheeze. Someone will need to fix it soon, or they'll suffocate down here. But there are no technicians left, no mechanics. Just officers and functionaries watching the clock tick down. Eva Braun appears at the corridor entrance, and the officers instinctively step back, creating space. She's dressed simply, a blue dress with white collar, practical shoes, but she carries herself with a strange serenity that seems obscene given the circumstances. She and Hitler were married just 2 days ago, a hasty ceremony conducted by a city councillor dragged from his hiding place, official stamps applied with shaking hands while Soviet shells provided the wedding march. Adolf, she says softly, ignoring the gathered officers entirely, you should eat something. I've asked the cook to prepare. There is no cook, Eva. He left yesterday. Hitler's voice is gentle with her, gentler than it's been with anyone else in this tomb. Most of the kitchen staff are gone. Frau Manzili is still here, I think, but there's hardly anything to prepare. Then I'll prepare something myself. She says this as if discussing a Sunday luncheon rather than the final meal in a bunker under siege. You need your strength. For what? The question doesn't need to be asked. Everyone in the room knows there's nothing left that requires strength. No more decisions to make. No more orders to give that will make any difference. The machinery of the Reich is grinding to a halt like a clock with a broken mainspring, and no amount of strength will wind it again. A young signals officer, barely old enough to shave, bursts into the map room, his helmet askew, his uniform torn at the shoulder. "Herr General." He addresses Krebs, breathless. Message from General Weidling. The city commandant reports that ammunition supplies for the Berlin garrison will be exhausted within 24 hours. 48 at most if we ration severely. Krebs takes the message, reads it, then looks at Hitler with a question in his eyes. The Führer waves his hand in a gesture that might mean anything or nothing. "Tell Weidling." Hitler begins, then stops. "Tell Weidling to use his best judgment." The phrase, so mundane, so bureaucratic, strikes everyone as profoundly wrong. This is a man who once dictated the movement of individual battalions from 1,000 miles away, who raged at generals for retreating 10 meters without permission, who insisted on approving the design of belt buckles and the wording of propaganda posters. Now he's delegating the defense of his capital to an officer's best judgment. Bergdorf clears his throat. "Mein Führer, there are still options. Bormann is correct that an evacuation." To where, Wilhelm? Hitler's use of the man's first name is startling in its intimacy. To the Alpine Redoubt? That fantasy fortress that exists only in Goebbels' propaganda? To Argentina on a submarine? To some safe house in the mountains where I can live out my years as a fugitive? He shakes his head. No. Frederick the Great said that a king must learn to die properly. Perhaps that's the only decision left that I can make correctly. The implication crashes through the room like one of the Soviet shells above. Eva's hand goes to her throat. Krebs straightens unconsciously. Von below looks away, suddenly fascinated by a crack in the concrete wall. "Mein Führer," Bormann says, his voice urgent now, "the movement needs you. Even in exile, your presence." The movement. Hitler's laugh is ugly, devoid of humor. "Martin, the movement died at Stalingrad. We've just been parading its corpse around for 2 years, pretending the smell wasn't there." He moves back to the map table, running his finger along the red arrows converging on Berlin. "Do you know what breaks my heart? Not the cities we've lost. Not the territory. Not even the men, God forgive me." He looks up and his eyes are wet. "It's that I convinced them to believe. Millions of people, good people, decent people, I convinced them that destiny was on our side. That we were building something eternal. That their sacrifices meant something." His finger traces a circle around Berlin, around the tiny blue dot that represents all that remains. "And now their children are dying in the rubble of a city I destroyed, defending a man who led them nowhere but here. To this. To the end of everything." Magda Goebbels has materialized beside Eva, and the two women stand like bookends to catastrophe, one who married into this apocalypse 40 hours ago, one who plans to die in it with her children rather than live in the world that comes after. Magda speaks, her voice clear and steady. "The children are asking about the noise, Mein Führer. The explosions. They think it's fireworks." Hitler closes his eyes. "Let them think that. And when they ask to go outside, to see the fireworks properly, tell them." He opens his eyes, but he's looking at something beyond the concrete walls, beyond the burning city, beyond perhaps even the understanding of anyone in the room. "Tell them the war is over. Tell them the truth. They deserve that much." Another explosion, close enough that dust sifts down from the ceiling, coating everyone in a fine gray powder. The lights flicker again. In the momentary darkness, you can hear someone praying, quiet, desperate words in Latin that trail off when the lights return. The telephone rings. No one moves to answer it. Finally, Gunsch picks up, listens, speaks a few words and hangs up with exaggerated care, as if the telephone itself might shatter. That was the propaganda ministry bunker. Dr. Goebbels wishes to know if the Führer has any final instructions for the German people. For a broadcast. Hitler is silent for a long moment. Then, "Tell Joseph that everything I needed to say I said at Nuremberg in 1938. Everything after that was just repetition." He straightens his jacket, a futile gesture as the uniform hangs on his wasted frame like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. "I'm going to my quarters. I need to think. I need to." He doesn't finish the sentence. Just turns and shuffles toward the corridor, toward the private rooms he shares with Eva, his trembling hand trailing along the wall for support. The officers watch him go, this man who once held a continent in his grip, now reduced to an old invalid feeling his way through a concrete tomb. Above them, Berlin burns. Around them, the Reich dies. And in the silence he leaves behind, you can hear the clock on the wall ticking away the final hours of the 1,000-year Reich. It lasted exactly 12 years, 3 months and 8 days. The hours that follow have a surreal, dreamlike quality. Time becomes elastic in the bunker, stretching and contracting without reference to the clocks that line the walls. It's 9:30 a.m. when Hitler emerges again, but it feels like days might have passed, or perhaps only minutes. The officers who've remained at their posts, because what else is there to do, where else is there to go? Snap to attention with mechanical precision, but their eyes are hollow. He's changed uniforms. The new one is crisp, pressed, the swastika armband bright red against the Feldgrau. Someone, probably Heinz Ling, his valet, has helped him shave. The transformation is jarring. For a moment he almost looks like the man from the newsreels, the figure who stood on balconies while millions raised their arms in salute. Then he moves and the illusion shatters. The tremor in his left hand is worse, his entire arm now shaking as if palsied. Krebs is bent over the map table, updating positions that no longer matter. Soviet forces have closed to within 100 meters of the Chancellery, roughly the length of a football field. The city garrison, what remains of it, is fragmented into isolated pockets. A few hundred men at the Zoo Flak Tower, a company of Volkssturm grandfathers in the Tiergarten, some Waffen-SS holdouts near Potsdamer Platz. On the map, they're marked with precise military symbols. In reality, they're terrified men rationing their last magazines, knowing that surrender means Soviet captivity or summary execution. Has Keitel responded? Hitler asks, his voice flat, bureaucratic, as if inquiring about a routine logistics report. Yes, mein Führer. Krebs straightens, holding a teletype. Field Marshal Keitel reports that no relief forces can reach Berlin. General Wenck's 12th Army has sustained severe losses attempting to break through Soviet lines. He recommends. Krebs hesitates. Recommends what? Immediate evacuation of all command staff. Surrender of Berlin to avoid unnecessary casualties. Hitler takes the message, reads it with the same detached attention he might give to a weather report. Keitel was always a good staff officer. Excellent at logistics, terrible at understanding the stakes. He hands it back. Send him my thanks for his service. Tell him he's free to act as he sees fit. Tell all of them, Donitz, Kesselring, whoever's left, they're released from their oaths. The phrase hangs in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Released from their oaths. The oath they swore not to Germany, not to the German people, but to Adolf Hitler personally. The oath that bound the Wehrmacht to the Nazi regime. He's dissolving it with a sentence, snapping the chains he forged himself. Bormann moves closer, his voice urgent and low. Mein Führer, if you release them from their oaths, they'll surrender immediately. The entire command structure will collapse. It's already collapsed, Martin. We're just making it official. Hitler gestures toward the ceiling, toward the battle raging above. Those children dying up there, they're not dying for Germany anymore. They're dying because no one has told them they can stop. He turns to Monk, the SS officer who commands the bunker defense. How many men do you have under your direct command? Perhaps 2,000 in the government district. Combat effective personnel, considerably fewer. 2,000. Hitler repeats the number as if testing its weight. At the Nuremberg rallies we had 200,000. In the stadiums, the streets, the parade grounds. Do you remember the torchlight processions, Bormann? The night I became Chancellor? The entire city seemed to be on fire with celebration. I remember, mein Führer. Now the city is on fire again. Different kind of fire. Hitler walks to the wall where the portrait of Frederick the Great hangs. He stares at it for a long moment, this painting he's carried with him from bunker to bunker, headquarters to headquarters as the Reich contracted around him. I used to look at this and see inspiration. A king who faced impossible odds and prevailed. Now I look at it and see accusation. Frederick saved Prussia. What have I saved? No one answers. The question isn't meant to be answered. Eva appears again, this time carrying 2 cups of tea on a small tray. The domesticity of the gesture is almost offensive in its normalcy. A wife bringing her husband tea while the world ends overhead. She sets the tray on the edge of the map table, carefully avoiding the acetate overlays with their red arrows and blue symbols. You should rest, Adolf. You've been awake for... I'll rest soon, Eva. Very soon. He takes the tea, wraps both hands around the cup as if trying to absorb its warmth. His hands shake so badly that liquid sloshes over the rim, staining the map beneath. Zhukov's 1st Belarusian front now has tea spilled across it, washing away Soviet tank divisions. Did you write to your sister? As I asked. Yes. I told her. Eva's composure cracks slightly. I told her I was happy. That I chose this. Good. Hitler nods, still staring at the ruined map. That's important. That people know you chose this. That I didn't force you. You didn't force anything. Eva's voice is firm. I could have left Berlin in March. You told me to leave. I stayed because you loved me. Hitler finishes the sentence for her, and there's something like wonder in his voice, as if he's only now understanding this fundamental truth. Of everyone, all the generals, all the party leaders, all the millions who shouted my name, you're the only one who loved me for myself. Not for what I represented. Not for what I could give them. Just me. He sets down the tea, reaches out and takes her hand. The gesture is awkward, unpracticed. This is not a man comfortable with displays of affection. But his fingers interlock with hers and they stand there, hand in hand, while artillery shells shake dust from the ceiling. Gunsch interrupts the moment, apologetic. Mein Führer, there's a delegation from General Weidling. The commandant wishes to discuss terms for. No. The word is sharp, final. There will be no surrender while I'm alive. Let that be clear to everyone. After they can do what they wish. But not before. The implication is no longer subtle. It's a statement of intent, a preview of the ending they all see coming. Krebs exchanges a glance with Bergdorf. Von Below finds something fascinating to study on his boots. Hitler releases Eva's hand and moves to a small writing desk in the corner of the map room. An incongruous piece of furniture, its polished wood and brass fittings seeming to belong to a different world, a different time. He opens a drawer, removes several sheets of paper and begins to write. His handwriting, once bold and aggressive, is now cramped, shaky, the letters barely legible. I'm writing my testament, he announces to the room. My political testament and my personal will. I want witnesses. Krebs, Bergdorf, Goebbels when he arrives and Bormann. For the next hour, the only sound is the scratch of pen on paper, punctuated by artillery fire and the occasional rattle of small arms combat filtering down from above. The officers wait in silence, uncertain whether they should remain or leave, paralyzed by the enormity of what's unfolding. This is history being written, literally, in a concrete box beneath a dying city. Finally, Hitler straightens, blots the final page and looks up. His eyes are clearer now, focused in a way they haven't been for weeks. Whatever decision was weighing on him has been made, and the relief is visible in his posture. This is my last will and testament, he begins, his voice taking on a formal, almost ceremonial tone. In it, I expel Hermann Göring and Heinrich Himmler from the party in all positions. They betrayed me. They betrayed Germany. I name Admiral Donitz as my successor as president of the Reich. He's a soldier, not a politician. Perhaps that's what Germany needs now, someone who understands duty without illusion. He pauses, seeming to choose his words carefully. I take full responsibility for starting this war. The German people are not to blame. The generals are not to blame. Only I am to blame. I believed we could remake Europe, remake the world. I was wrong. The admission cost him something. You can see it in the way his shoulders sag, the way his jaw tightens. I was wrong and millions died for my error. That's the truth history must record. Bormann looks stricken. Mein Führer, you can't. The legacy, the party? The party is over, Martin. The legacy is ash. Hitler taps the papers with one shaking finger. This is typed and ready for signature. I need witnesses. 4 of you will sign alongside me. Then copies will be sent out of Berlin, to Donitz, to whoever can receive them. This is how the 1,000-year Reich ends. Not with battle hymns and glory, but with paperwork and signatures. Goebbels arrives as if summoned, his club foot making his descent down the bunker stairs audible long before he appears. His face is gaunt, his eyes feverish, and he carries himself with a manic energy that seems to vibrate in the air around him. When he sees Hitler at the writing desk, he stops. Joseph. Hitler's greeting is simple, direct. I need you to witness my testament. Goebbels approaches the desk, reads the documents, and his expression cycles through shock, denial, and finally, a terrible resignation. This is truly the end then. This is truly the end. And you want me to. I want you to survive, Joseph. Someone needs to tell the story. Someone who was here, who saw it, who understands what happened. Hitler's voice is gentle, almost paternal. Take your family and go. The Russians might show you mercy. You're a civilian, not a military commander. Goebbels shakes his head slowly. No, Mein Führer. If you're staying, I'm staying. If you're ending this, then I'll end it too. Magda feels the same. And the children. His voice breaks. The children won't survive what comes after. Not as the offspring of Joseph Goebbels. Better they die here with us than face what the Soviets will do. The room goes silent. Even the artillery seems to pause as if the war itself is holding its breath. Hitler stares at his propaganda minister, this small man with the sharp mind and the sharper tongue, who's been with him since the beginning, since the beer halls and street fights of the 1920s. You don't have to do this. Yes, Goebbels says simply. I do. By 1 p.m. the testament is signed and witnessed. For copies on thin paper, rolled and sealed in metal canisters that might make it through Soviet lines to the outside world. 3 couriers volunteer: Wilhelm Zander, Heinz Lorenz, and SS Sturmbannführer Wilhelm Johann Meyer. Young men, relatively, with some chance of passing as ordinary soldiers or civilians once they shed their uniforms. They receive their orders standing at attention in the corridor. Reach donuts at Plan, reach the OKW command, reach anyone who can give these documents meaning. Hitler shakes each man's hand. The gesture is formal, almost rehearsed, but there's genuine emotion in his eyes. You're carrying the final orders of the Third Reich. Make sure they arrive. Then softer, and make sure you survive. Someone needs to remember that we weren't all monsters. The couriers depart up the stairs toward the surface, toward the burning city and the Soviet armies and whatever fate awaits them. Of the 3, only Zander and Johann Meyer will successfully escape Berlin. Lorenz will be captured, though his documents will eventually reach their destination through bizarre channels of military bureaucracy. But Hitler doesn't know this as he watches them go. He only knows that he's sending 3 more men into danger, 3 more lives wagered on a cause that's already lost. The afternoon stretches with an agonizing slowness. Lunch is served, if you can call it that. Constanze Manzieli, the cook who refused to evacuate, has prepared pasta with a thin butter sauce and a small salad. The vegetables come from the bunker's emergency stores, slightly wilted, slightly brown. Hitler eats mechanically without tasting, his attention fixed on the middle distance. Eva sits beside him eating nothing, her hand occasionally touching his arm as if to confirm he's still there, still solid, still real. Around them, the bunker continues its death rattle. The ventilation system has started making a new sound, a grinding shriek every 15 minutes that sends everyone's shoulders up around their ears in anticipation. The air is thick, stale, recycled through damaged filters until it tastes like metal and decay. Someone has tried to mask the smell with pine disinfectant, which only makes it worse, adding a chemical sharpness to the miasma of unwashed bodies and fierce sweat. Traudl Junge, Hitler's personal secretary, sits at a typewriter in the anteroom, preparing clean copies of various documents, letters of dismissal, final orders, the minutiae of empire ending. She's 25 years old, and her hands shake as she types. Later, decades later, she'll write about this day, about the surreal horror of typing bureaucratic documents while the world explodes overhead. But now, in this moment, she just types. Clack, clack, clack. The sound is almost soothing in its normalcy, a reminder that some mechanical things still function even when everything else is falling apart. At 2:30 p.m., General Weidling arrives in person. His uniform is covered in brick dust and dried blood, not his own. He's been personally directing the defense of the government quarter, moving from position to position as Soviet forces grind forward meter by meter. He looks like he hasn't slept in a week because he hasn't. His salute is crisp despite his exhaustion, a testament to decades of military training that persists even at the end. Mein Führer, Weidling begins, and his voice is hoarse from shouting orders over artillery fire. I must report that organized resistance in Berlin will cease within 24 hours. We have no ammunition reserves. No food. Medical supplies are gone. The hospitals are overwhelmed. The civilian population is suffering terribly. Hitler listens without interruption. When Weidling finishes, there's a long silence. Finally, if you were to order a surrender, General, how would you do it? The question catches Weidling off guard. Mein Führer, you heard me. If the situation is hopeless and you've just told me it is, how would you end it? Specifically. Tactically. Weidling glances at Krebs, who gives a minute shrug. I would order all units to break into small groups and attempt to break out west toward American lines. Simultaneously, I would send emissaries to Soviet commanders under white flags, offering to cease fire in exchange for. In exchange for what? Hitler interrupts. What do we have to bargain with? What can we offer that they can't simply take? Nothing, Mein Führer. We have nothing. Weidling says this without emotion, simply stating a fact. But a formal surrender would save lives. The civilians at least. The wounded. Hitler nods slowly, absorbing this. After I'm dead, General, you will do exactly what you just described. You will order the breakout. You will negotiate the surrender. You will do whatever is necessary to save as many lives as possible. Is that clear? After your? Weidling stops, understanding flooding his features. Mein Führer, I must urge you to reconsider. Your presence, even in captivity, could serve as a rallying point for what? For whom? Hitler stands, and despite his physical deterioration, there's still force in his presence, still some echo of the man who commanded armies. General, I'm going to say something to you that I want you to remember, and I want you to tell anyone who asks. Are you listening? Yes, Mein Führer. I would rather burn in hell than surrender to the Soviets. Not because I'm brave. Not because I'm defiant. But because I know exactly what I've done to them, and I know exactly what they'll do to me in return. I destroyed their cities. I murdered their civilians. I tried to erase their entire race from existence. Do you understand what they'll do if they take me alive? Weidling nods slowly. They'll put me in a cage, General. They'll parade me through Moscow like some conquered barbarian king. They'll put me on trial, and I'll stand in a defendant's dock while they list my crimes, and they're right, every crime they list will be true and accurate. And then they'll hang me. Not quickly. Slowly. They'll make sure it takes time. They'll make sure cameras capture every moment. And that image, Adolf Hitler dangling from a rope, dying slowly while the world watches, that will be the final image of the Third Reich. That's what history will remember. He sits back down, the energy draining from him as quickly as it arrived. I won't give them that satisfaction. I won't give them that symbol. I'll end this on my terms, the only terms I have left. Weidling stands silent for a moment, then salutes. I understand, Mein Führer. I will carry out your orders. Good. You're dismissed, General. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being honest with me when others couldn't be. After Weidling departs, the bunker settles into an uneasy quiet. The staff move through their routines, checking communications equipment that no longer communicates with anyone, updating maps that no longer reflect any meaningful reality, preparing meals that no one eats. It's a pantomime of normalcy, a collective agreement Hitler to pretend that what's about to happen isn't about to happen. 4:45 minutes, they're alone, and no one knows, no one will ever know, what passes between them in that time. Do they talk about the life they might have had if he'd remained a painter in Vienna? Do they discuss the war, the decisions, the road that led to this bunker? Or do they simply sit in silence, holding hands, two people at the end of all things? When they emerge at 3:15 p.m., Hitler has a small wooden box under his arm. He opens it carefully, revealing 2 brass cartridges, cyanide capsules wrapped in thin copper. He holds them up to the light, examining them as if they might be defective, as if even now there might be some escape clause hidden in their chemical composition. Himmler sent these, he says, to no one in particular. Before he betrayed me, before he tried to negotiate surrender behind my back. He sent a whole box of them. High quality, he assured me. Quick and painless. Tested on animals and prisoners. His mouth twists. Tested on prisoners. Of course he tested them on prisoners. He calls for Professor Werner Hasse, the surgeon who's been treating him for his various ailments. Hasse arrives quickly, his medical bag in hand, though there's little medicine left in it. Mostly bandages and morphine, the essentials of triage. Professor, I need you to confirm something for me. Hitler holds out one of the capsules. If I bite this, how long until death? Hasse takes the capsule, examines it professionally. 3 to 5 seconds for unconsciousness. Death within 15 seconds. Possibly faster, depending on individual physiology. Painless. There will be convulsions, but you won't feel them. The cyanide disrupts cellular respiration. You'll be unconscious before your body realizes it's dying. And if I use a pistol simultaneously? Hasse's face goes pale. Mein Führer, that would be redundant. I'm not asking if it's redundant. I'm asking if it's effective. If I bite the capsule and immediately shoot myself, is there any chance of survival? Any chance they could revive me? No. Hasse says firmly. No chance whatsoever. Good. Hitler takes the capsule back, returns it to its case. Thank you, Professor. You can go. But Hasse doesn't move. Mein Führer, I must ask, is there nothing that can change your mind? Nothing at all? Hitler looks at him with something approaching pity. Professor, I made my decision weeks ago. Today is just the execution of that decision. Literally. He attempts a smile, but it comes out as a grimace. Physician, heal thyself. But some diseases are terminal. The clock on the wall reads 3:20 p.m. Outside, above, the battle for Berlin continues its mechanical progression. Soviet artillery pounds the chancellery. Soviet infantry advance through the rubble. Soviet tanks crush the barricades erected by desperate defenders. The mathematics of destruction are implacable, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the bunker below. Hitler calls for everyone to gather in the map room. Not an order, a request. Those who remain come slowly, reluctantly. Goebbels and Magda, Bormann, Krebs, Bergdorf, the secretaries, the adjutants, the few staff members who haven't fled or died. Perhaps 30 people in total, the last witnesses to the 1,000-year Reich. They arrange themselves in a rough semicircle, and Hitler stands before them, Eva at his side. For a moment, no one speaks. The silence is broken only by the wheeze of the ventilation system and the distant thud of artillery. Then Hitler begins what will be his final speech, not to millions in a stadium, not to an adoring crowd, but to 30 frightened people in a concrete box under the earth. I want to thank you, he begins, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. For staying. For being loyal when loyalty became the hardest thing in the world. You could have left. You should have left. But you stayed, and that means something. It means everything. He pauses, collecting his thoughts, and in that pause you can hear everything. The grinding of tank tread somewhere above, the crackle of flames consuming what remains of the city, the shallow breathing of 30 people who know they're witnessing something that will echo through history. I've made many mistakes, Hitler continues, and the admission seems to cost him physically. His shoulders hunch, his head drops slightly. I believed in destiny when I should have believed in logistics. I believed in will when I should have believed in mathematics. I asked you, all of Germany, to follow me into a future I promised would be glorious, and instead I led you here. To this. Magda Goebbels has tears streaming down her face, but she makes no sound. Trottel Junge stares at her shoes. Bormann's jaw is clenched so tight you can see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. What I'm about to do, what Eva and I are about to do, is not courage. Don't mistake it for courage. It's the final admission of failure. It's what happens when a man realizes he's destroyed everything he claimed to love. Hitler's voice cracks slightly. The Soviet soldiers who will occupy this bunker in a few hours, they have more right to be here than I do. They're fighting for their survival. I was fighting for an idea that should have remained an idea. He reaches into his jacket pocket and removes a small pistol, a Walther PPK 7.65 millimeters, the weapon he's carried since the early days of the party. He doesn't brandish it, doesn't make it theatrical. He simply holds it, testing its weight, as familiar with it as a carpenter with his favorite hammer. I'm going to ask something of you and you're free to refuse. After Eva and I are gone, I need our bodies burned. Completely. I don't want the Soviets to have anything to parade. Nothing to photograph. Nothing to desecrate. He looks at Otto Gunsch specifically. Otto, I'm giving you this responsibility. Gasoline, matches, burn everything until there's nothing left but ash. Can you do this? Gunsch's face is ashen, but he nods. Yes, mein Führer. I can do this. Thank you. Hitler turns to Heinz Ling, his valet. Heinz, I need you to help Otto. And I need you to make sure, absolutely sure, that we're dead before you begin. I don't want any mistakes. I don't want to wake up burning. You understand? Ling can barely speak. I understand, mein Führer. Good. Hitler seems to be working through a mental checklist, ticking off final arrangements with the same attention to detail he once applied to military operations. My personal effects, my paintings, my books, the papers in my desk. Burn those too. Nothing survives. Nothing becomes a relic. Nothing gets sold at auction or displayed in a museum. He turns to Goebbels. Joseph, you understand why I'm doing this? You understand this isn't abandonment? Goebbels steps forward and the two men embrace. Awkwardly, stiffly, two people who've spent more time plotting empires than expressing affection. I understand, mein Führer. You're denying them the satisfaction. You're controlling the one thing you still can control. Yes. Exactly, yes. Hitler releases him, steps back. Take care of Magda. Take care of the children. Or don't. Do what you think is right. I release you from any obligation to follow my example. We've already decided, Magda says quietly. The children won't survive what comes after. Better this way. Better with us. The words hang in the air like a death sentence, which is precisely what they are. Hitler looks at her for a long moment and something passes between them, not agreement exactly but recognition. Two people who've reached the same terrible conclusion from different paths. Then may God have mercy on all of us, Hitler says, though he's never been a religious man, though he's spent years mocking Christianity as weakness. Because history won't. He moves through the assembled group, shaking hands with each person individually. The gestures are formal, ceremonial, a receiving line at the world's worst wedding reception. Some people can barely touch his hand. Others grip it desperately, as if contact might anchor them to something solid in a world that's dissolved into chaos. When he reaches Trottel Junge, she's sobbing openly. Mein Führer, I can't. You can, Fräulein Junge. You're young. You'll survive this. You'll live a long life and tell people what you saw here. That's important. Someone needs to tell the truth. He presses something into her hand, a cyanide capsule. But if you find you can't survive, if it becomes too much, you have this option. I'm not ordering you to use it. I'm just giving you the choice. She stares at the capsule in her palm, this tiny brass cylinder that represents both escape and damnation. The farewells continue. Each one is unique, personal, a final accounting between Hitler and the people who followed him to the end. To Krebs he speaks about military honor. To Bergdorf about duty. To Bormann about the future of the party, though they both know there is no future, that the party died somewhere in the streets above them. Finally, only Eva remains at his side. The others have retreated to give them privacy, though in a bunker privacy is relative. They can still see, still hear, still witness. I should have married you years ago, Hitler says to her, his voice low enough that only those closest can hear. You deserve better than this. Better than hiding in apartments, better than being a secret, better than dying in a hole in the ground. I had exactly what I wanted, Eva replies, and her voice is steady, calm, almost serene. I had you. That's all I ever needed. You're lying, but it's a kind lie, and I'm grateful for it. He touches her face, a gesture so tender it seems to belong to different people in a different time. Are you frightened? No. She says it without hesitation. Not of what comes next. Only of being apart from you. Even in death. We won't be apart. I promise you that. Whatever comes after, heaven, hell, oblivion, we'll face it together. They stand there, this unlikely pair, the dictator who conquered Europe and the woman who loved him despite everything, and for just a moment they're not historical figures. They're just two people saying goodbye to the world. At 3:30 p.m., they retreat to Hitler's private study. The door closes behind them with a soft click that somehow sounds louder than all the artillery fire above. Outside, in the corridor, the staff members stand in small clusters, speaking in whispers or not speaking at all, waiting for the sound they all know is coming but no one wants to hear. Inside the study, Hitler and Eva Braun sit on a small sofa, blue upholstery, slightly worn. The room is sparse. A desk, some chairs, a portrait of Frederick the Great on one wall, a photograph of Hitler's mother on another. No windows, of course. Just artificial light from a single fixture, casting harsh shadows. Hitler removes the Walther PPK from his jacket, checks the magazine out of habit, chambers around. The mechanical sounds, click-clack-click, are crisp, businesslike. Eva holds her cyanide capsule, rolling it between her fingers like a worry stone. At the same time, Hitler says, "You bite down, I shoot." Simultaneous. Like we planned. Like we planned, Eva agrees. They sit in silence for a moment. From somewhere in the bunker, someone is playing a phonograph. Beethoven, the Moonlight Sonata, the melancholy notes seeping through the concrete walls. Who chose this music? Who thought this was appropriate? Or perhaps it's just coincidence, someone seeking comfort in art while the world ends. Do you have any regrets? Eva asks suddenly. Hitler considers the question seriously. Which regrets would you like? I have so many to choose from. Real regrets. Not political ones. Personal ones. I regret. He pauses, searching for honesty in the wreckage of his life. I regret that I never learned to be ordinary. To be content with simple things. To paint my pictures and walk my dog and love my wife without needing to conquer the world to prove I was worthy of those simple pleasures. Eva nods. That's a good regret. An honest one. And you? Any regrets? None. She says it firmly, definitively. Even knowing how it ends, I wouldn't change anything. I loved you. That was enough. Outside, the phonograph has moved to a different piece. Wagner now, Götterdämmerung, the Twilight of the Gods. How appropriate. How perfectly, terribly appropriate. Hitler raises the pistol to his right temple. His hand is steady now, steadier than it's been in months. Some final gift from his nervous system, some last moment of clarity before the darkness. Eva lifts the cyanide capsule to her lips. They look at each other one final time. 3, Hitler says. 2, Eva whispers. 1. The sound that follows is muffled by the concrete walls but unmistakable. A single gunshot, flat and final, followed by the sound of something heavy slumping against the sofa. Then silence. In the corridor, everyone freezes. Gunsch and Ling exchange glances, neither wanting to be the first to open that door, neither wanting to confirm what they already know. They wait, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, giving the silence time to settle, giving death time to complete its work. Finally, at 3:40 p.m., Heinz Ling turns the handle and pushes open the door. Adolf Hitler sits on the right side of the sofa, slumped slightly forward. Blood streams from his right temple where the bullet entered, pooling on the armrest, dripping onto the carpet. The Walther PPK has fallen from his hand onto the cushion beside him. His eyes are open, staring at nothing. Eva Braun sits on the left side, her body fallen sideways against the armrest. The cyanide capsule has fallen from her lips onto her lap. Her face is peaceful, almost sleeping, except for the slight discoloration around her mouth. She's wearing the blue dress with white collar, the same one she wore to lunch. Her hands are folded in her lap. Ling steps inside, checks for pulses even though he knows he won't find them. Behind him, Gunsch appears, goes pale, steadies himself against the doorframe. "Get the gasoline," Ling says quietly. "We have our orders. The last Führer of the Third Reich is dead. His Reich survived him by 7 days." The next hour unfolds with a grim, mechanical precision that would have pleased Hitler's obsession with order. Gunsch and Ling wrap the bodies in blankets, gray Wehrmacht issue, rough wool that scratches against their hands as they work. They don't speak. There are no words adequate to the task of carrying your former leader's corpse up a narrow stairwell while Soviet artillery systematically destroys everything above. 4 men are needed for the task: Gunsch, Ling, SS Hauptscharführer Erich Kempke, and one other whose name will be lost to history. They carry Hitler first, his body surprisingly light, reduced by illness and stress to barely 150 pounds. Then Eva, lighter still, a small woman made smaller by death. The blankets leave trails of blood on the concrete steps, dark streaks that will still be visible when Soviet soldiers occupy the bunker 3 days later. The garden exit opens onto a scene from Hieronymus Bosch. The Chancellery Garden, once manicured, once beautiful, once the site of diplomatic receptions and Nazi pageantry, is a moonscape of craters and rubble. Trees are burning. The air is thick with smoke and brick dust. Somewhere close, perhaps 50 meters away, you can hear Soviet voices shouting in Russian, the guttural commands of officers directing their men forward. They lay the bodies in a shell crater, perhaps 3 meters from the bunker exit. It's not ceremonial. It's not dignified. It's simply the closest available depression in the earth that offers some concealment from direct observation. Kempke has procured approximately 180 liters of gasoline, scrounged from damaged vehicles in the Chancellery garage, siphoned from reserves that were meant for non-existent counterattacks. A Soviet shell screams overhead and impacts somewhere in the ruined Chancellery building. The concussion wave ripples through the smoke, and the men instinctively duck, though if a shell hit them directly, ducking would be meaningless. Another shell follows, then another. The Soviets are conducting systematic suppression fire, saturating the government district in preparation for their final assault. Gunsch pours the gasoline. The smell is overwhelming, petroleum and death and burning wood, a chemical symphony of endings. He empties can after can over the blanket-wrapped bodies until the crater is pooled with liquid that gleams rainbow-colored in the firelight. His hands shake. Gasoline splashes onto his boots, his uniform. He doesn't notice or doesn't care. Ling produces matches, ordinary paper matches in a cardboard box, the kind you'd use to light a cigarette. There's something absurdly mundane about them, something that emphasizes the grotesque gap between the magnitude of what they're doing and the simplicity of the tools required. He strikes one. It flares, bright and yellow in the smoke-dimmed afternoon. He tosses it into the crater. The gasoline ignites with a hollow humph, flames leaping 2 meters into the air, orange and red and hungry. The heat is immediate and intense, driving the men back toward the bunker entrance. They stand there, partially shielded by a concrete blast wall, watching as Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun burn. The process takes longer than they expected. Bodies don't burn cleanly, don't dissolve into ash like paper in a fireplace. Fat renders and feeds the flames. Bones blacken and crack. The smell? There's no preparing for the smell. It's sweet and chemical and utterly wrong, the smell of meat cooking mixed with gasoline and something else, something primal that triggers revulsion at a cellular level. They feed the fire periodically, adding more gasoline when the flames die down, stoking it like some infernal forge. Goebbels appears at one point, stands silently for a moment watching the flames, then retreats back underground without speaking. What is there to say? What words exist for this moment? The artillery fire intensifies. Soviet forces are clearly preparing for a final push into the government quarter. Machine gun fire rattles somewhere close. German MG-42s answering Soviet PPSH submachine guns, the sound of men dying for positions that no longer have any strategic value. By 6 p.m., approximately 2.5 hours after the burning began, the bodies are reduced to charred remains and bone fragments. It's not complete cremation, that would require hours more and industrial equipment they don't have. But it's enough. Enough that Soviet investigators will later struggle to confirm identification. Enough that no intact corpse will be paraded through Moscow streets. Gunch and Ling scrape what remains into a shell crater, cover it with earth and debris. The location is approximately 3 meters from the bunker emergency exit, marked by a small concrete drainage pipe. Soviet intelligence officers will eventually find these remains, will conduct forensic analysis, will argue for decades about authenticity. But that's for the future. Now, in this moment, it's simply 4 exhausted men burying ashes while the city burns around them. They retreat back into the bunker. The door closes. The seal engages with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, the surviving staff have gathered in the conference room, though conference implies a purpose that no longer exists. They sit or stand in small groups, speaking in whispers or not speaking at all, waiting for whatever comes next. Goebbels has assumed a kind of informal command, though command of what is unclear. He drafts a message to Admiral Donitz, informing him of Hitler's death and his succession as Reich president. The message is clinical, bureaucratic. The Führer deceased yesterday at 1530 hours. Testament of April 29 appoints you Reich president. No emotion. No commentary. Just facts transmitted through the last functioning radio link to the outside world. That night, April 30th transitioning into May 1st, the bunker becomes a tomb for the living. People sleep where they can, on chairs, on the floor, in corridors. The ventilation system finally fails completely around midnight, and the air becomes thick, suffocating. Someone props open the blast door to allow circulation, and you can hear the battle outside. Closer now, much closer, the distinct sounds of Soviet troops clearing buildings room by room. Goebbels spends the evening with Magda and their 6 children, Helga 12, Hilda 11, Helmut 9, Hold 8, Hedda 7, and Heidi 4. The children are dressed in their nightgowns, prepared for bed as if this were a normal evening, as if tomorrow might bring school and playing and all the ordinary rhythms of childhood. Magda has made a decision that history will judge harshly, a decision that even in this bunker of horrors stands out for its cold finality. The children will not survive into the post-Reich world. Dr. Ludwig Stumpfeger, an SS physician, prepares morphine injections. The children are told they're receiving medicine to help them sleep through the loud noises. They trust their mother. Why wouldn't they? What child doesn't trust their mother? One by one they're sedated, their small bodies going limp, their breathing becoming slow and regular. Then Magda administers the cyanide capsules, crushing them between their teeth while they're unconscious. Their deaths are quick. Painless, or so the physicians claim, though who can truly say? Within minutes, all 6 children are dead, their small bodies laid out on beds in adjacent rooms like some obscene parody of a nursery. Goebbels and Magda wait until evening on May 1st for their own end. They climb the stairs to the garden, to the same Hell's Cape where Hitler burned hours before. An SS orderly, whose name like so much else is lost to history, shoots them both. First Magda, then Joseph. Their bodies are burned, though less thoroughly than Hitler's. Partially charred corpses will be found by Soviet troops, identifiable enough to confirm their identities. The bunker empties rapidly after that. Monk organizes a breakout attempt for the surviving staff and military personnel. Around 10 p.m. on May 1st, groups begin moving through the U-Bahn tunnels, through the sewers, through any route that might lead west, away from Soviet forces, toward the slim hope of American capture instead of Russian. Most don't make it. Soviet forces have sealed the city. Machine gun positions cover every exit. Artillery fire blocks every street. Of approximately 200 people who attempt the breakout from the Reich Chancellery bunker complex, fewer than 50 successfully escape Berlin. The rest are killed or captured within hours. Krebs and Bergdorf remain behind. On the morning of May 2nd, as Soviet troops begin entering the upper levels of the bunker, they retreat to a private room and shoot themselves. 2 more generals, 2 more bodies, 2 more casualties of a regime that consumed everyone it touched. Soviet forces secure the bunker completely by the afternoon of May 2nd. They find a labyrinth of concrete corridors, abandoned offices, scattered papers, blood-stained maps. They find the children's bodies. They find evidence of the hasty cremations in the garden. What they don't find initially is Hitler's intact corpse, exactly as he intended. General Helmuth Weidling, Berlin's commandant, formally surrenders the city to the Soviets on May 2 at 8:23 a.m. The battle for Berlin is over. The official death toll: approximately 170,000 Soviet soldiers killed or wounded, approximately 300,000 German military casualties, and somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 German civilians dead, exact numbers lost in the chaos of the city's destruction. The Reich that was supposed to last 1,000 years lasted 12 years, 3 months and 8 days. It began with torchlight parades and mass rallies, with promises of glory and renewal and destiny. It ended in a concrete bunker with the smell of gasoline and burning flesh, with cyanide and bullets and children murdered by their parents. History would remember April 30, 1945, not as the day Hitler realized the war was lost. He'd known that for weeks, perhaps months, perhaps since Stalingrad if we're being honest. It would be remembered as the day he finally accepted that knowledge, the day he stopped pretending, the day he looked at the map with its red arrows and blue symbols and saw it not as a tactical situation but as an epitaph. The exact moment came not with the fall of the Reichstag, though that was the trigger. It came in the silence after, in the space between Gunst's report and Hitler's response, in that handful of seconds where you could watch a man's entire mythology collapse, where the architect of so much suffering finally, belatedly, impossibly late, understood the full magnitude of what he had done. He had promised Germany glory. He delivered ash. He had promised a 1,000-year Reich. He delivered 12 years of devastation. He had promised victory. He delivered the most comprehensive defeat in modern history. And on April 30, 1945, in a bunker 16 meters beneath Berlin, Adolf Hitler finally saw the truth. The war wasn't lost on that day. The war had been lost long before. But on that day, at that moment, with Soviet flags flying over the Reichstag and Soviet soldiers 200 meters from his bunker, Hitler could no longer deny what everyone else had already accepted. Germany was finished. The Reich was over. And he was the man responsible for it all.